Hey everybody, it's Keith, and this is Wednesday. We're in bed together. It's Wednesdays in bed with Keith. So, first of all, happy Pesach to all my Jewish family and friends who are celebrating this evening. Um, I wish you all a very happy holiday. But speaking of holidays, so Easter is approaching, and I love Easter. I don't know about everyone else, but I just love Easter, and there's so many reasons why I love Easter. I love Easter because generally it's at the time of year where like it's springtime, and spring is my favorite. The flowers are budding and blooming, the trees are coming back to life, the grass is green. There's that little Easter bunny that's, flopping around, dropping his eggs everywhere, and kids just get a biggest kick out of it. And there's, of course, the women's Easter bonnets. I don't know if that's a thing anymore, but when I was little, that was definitely a thing. So I'm guessing I probably was in like third grade, and we had to have like an Easter parade at our school, where we would all march around and we had to make these bonnets. And so my mom takes me to Kresge's, which was this sort of like five and dime store in Milford. And she goes to the hat section, and of course I run to the ladies' hats and I pick out this big flouncy, like I think it was like pale baby blue or robin's egg blue or something. It had this big bow on it. And she's just like, no, 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 not this time. And so we had to go over to like where the men's hats were. And she picked out like this styrofoam. It looked sort of like what like a barbershop quartet would wear. And then she bought some ribbon, and she got like Easter eggs and a little Easter bunny and all that kind of stuff. But I snuck out to where the tulips were and the daffodils, like all the fake flowers. And I just sort of like gathered some up. And when my mom was like checking out, I sort of like flung them, and the lady cashed them out. And my mother was like looking at me, and she was like, oh. So anyway, we come home and we make me this masculine hat with the eggs and the bunnies, and then we hot glued like all these beautiful flowers all over it. And I went to school and I just paraded around in my hat, and I was very proud of that hat. But anyway, the thing I love most is being Italian. Because when you're Italian, everything is magnified. Like funerals are magnified, Christmas is magnified, the birth of a child is magnified. It's just all magnified. So of course, Easter is magnified. And my mom was a wonderful baker, and she would make all the traditional Italian pies. She would do the ricotta pie, and that was delicious. And she would do rice pie, and I wouldn't eat rice pie when I was little. So she concocted this version of it made with chocolate, and it was a chocolate rice pie, and I just thought that was like the bomb. But she would also make the abitaghena, which is, the big ham pie, and it's got all these cured meats in it and everything. Well, when my father had his heart attack, she decided that she had to cut back on everything. And we were all like, no, no. And so anyway, she was like, no, we cannot have too much cholesterol. So what she did was she sort of took the abitaghena and cut all the eggs in half, because she thought those were like the things that gave my dad cholesterol, but kept like all the like the cheeses and the cured meats and the grated cheese and the lard in the crust. And so that was really kind of funny, because what happened was it wasn't really like the most moist pie, but everyone told her how good it was. So we just let her sort of live in that fantasy. But I can sort of remember like that wasn't making much sense to me, because it basically was like a heart attack on a plate. But I loved it. And I actually just finished making one, and I don't put 8 eggs, I put like 20 eggs. But anyway, so one Easter Sunday, we were going off to church, and I hated going to church. I loved God and I loved Jesus, but I just hated going to church. So I decided I was going to like have a revolution that day. So I got all dressed up, and I had my little bow tie on and my little jacket. And my brother Randy went out to get in the car. Dennis was away at college, and my dad went out to get in the car, and I saw my mother, and I ran down the hall, and I like slammed her bathroom door, and I locked it. And she was like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm not going to church. And she was like, you have to go to church. And I was like, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to go to church, and I don't want to go to church, and you're not going to make me. And she was like, Keith, you come out of there right now. She said, I'm going to give you to the count of 3. And I'm like, you can count to 10, and I don't care. And so anyway, I hear her, like, my father comes in, and she's like, Henry. And he's like, what's the problem? And she goes, he won't come out. He won't come out. And if he doesn't come out and he misses church, he's going to go to hell. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like, am I going to go to hell? And my mother had this thing about hell. Like, every time you did something that she didn't approve of, you're going to hell. And that was just how it went. So my father's like, boom, boom, boom. He's like, Chipper, you get out of there. You get out of there right now. And I was like, I'm not coming. And he's like, I want you to come out right now. And I was like, I'm not getting out of here. He goes, I'm going to leave you here and you're going to be all alone. And I said, fine, fine. And so he must have motioned to my mother for her to walk out. And my mother walks out and then he's like, I'm leaving. And he, like, his feet and, you know, you could hear them like walking down the hall. And so all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I'm all alone in this house. And I was like maybe 5 or 6, 7 max. And I opened the door and the house is silent. And I peek out. And then all of a sudden I take like 3 steps, which puts me sort of past my parents' bedroom. And wham, my father comes and he grabs me from behind and I scream, ah! And he just like whips me under his arm like this and he starts carrying me out of the house and I'm going, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. And my mother's in the car and he puts me in the back seat and Randy's looking at me like shaking his head like, what is? And so my mother turns to me and I said, I don't want to be Catholic, I want to be Jewish. And she just says, little man, as long as you're living in this house, you're Catholic. She said, and once you grow up, you can be Jewish. But right now, you're going to church. And my brother Randy looks at me and goes, you're a dick. And I was like, oh my God, he just called me a dick. So anyway, that was that. But I'm going to digress for 1 second because I got more laughs out of going to church. And I know you're not supposed to laugh in church. I mean, that's just like sacrilege. But one Christmas, my Aunt Marion, my mother, my father, and myself went to church and on Christmas Eve. And so, you know, everybody used to sit sort of in the same rows. So you sort of knew the person who was going to sit in front of you. So this woman comes walking in, Mrs. Bomboloni, I think, or something like that, some wild Italian name. And she's got like this big bouffant hairdo. It was like all teased up and it was like very glamorous. And she was draped in diamonds. Every week this woman was draped in diamonds. I'm not exactly sure what her husband did. You know. So anyway, she comes into the pew in front of us. And all of a sudden, on the back of her brand new like coyote fur coat, or maybe it was a lynx, I'm not even sure. From the belt, she had this wooden hanger with the name of the store, Kramer's, which was this upscale store in New Haven who sold furs, like swinging off the back of her coat. And my Aunt Marion looked at me and I just started laughing. Like I couldn't control myself. Like, and the harder I tried not to laugh, the harder I started laughing. And my mother saw me and she started laughing. And it was just like so crazy. So Mrs. Bomboloni sits down. She doesn't even know that this thing is under her. Like she must have had a huge butt or something because this was just like, so she stands up to say a prayer and Aunt Marion literally like reaches over and like slips the coat hanger off of her and holds on to it. Mass is over, everyone's leaving, and she taps Bomboloni on the back and she goes, Mrs. Bomboloni, first of all, Merry Christmas. She said, and second of all, this was swinging from the back of your coat. And Bomboloni was like, oh my God, I walked out of the house and this wasn't our first stop. What must people say? And why my husband didn't notice this? And like the husband probably didn't have a very good Christmas Eve. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, I used to go to church all the time and really, you know, followed that path for a very long time. And my brothers and I are very different in that respect as adults. So my brother Dennis is very much involved in the Catholic Church. He's I won't say very religious, but he's very observant of the customs and the Mass and so on and so forth. My brother Randy, at the opposite end of the spectrum, was an absolute atheist. Like one time he wrote a paper, he went to a like Jesuit school and he wrote a paper on how like there is no God and, you know, everything is based off of science, which my parents got called in and they went and defended his right to write whatever he wanted, but then basically grounded him for like 2 months during the summertime. And I sit like right in the middle. Like I do believe in what I was taught. I don't believe in the organization of it. I just cling to, like I talk to Jesus when I'm having a problem, and he and I are like this. Like we work things out all the time, and I just think that it's absolutely okay to believe in something if it gets you through your life and through hard times. I don't necessarily think you have to go to a building to pray or to feel what you're feeling. I mean, there are so many religions, and not one of them is wrong. With the exception of like if they're like cutting off people's body parts or something, that's just crazy. But I think that if you find solace and you find comfort and it gets you through, and when you're feeling sad you have someone to turn to or something to turn to or an energy, I just think that's so beautiful. But the one thing that I just don't understand, I think it's okay to practice what you preach, but I think you shouldn't preach and not practice. And that to me is what that Sermon on the Mount, when the priest told me or told our congregation, parish, that you would be loved, except you wouldn't be allowed into heaven or to God's kingdom if you were a murderer or homosexual. And at that moment, the whole parish turned and looked at each other, and we were like, what is this man talking about? So that to me is when you preach, but you don't practice. And it's so much better to practice than to preach. Happy Easter, everybody. Happy Pesach. And no matter what you celebrate, happy that.